Emily Johnson walked with quiet purpose through the stately corridors of the Preston Music Conservatory, her worn sneakers making a muted squeak against the polished marble floor, a stark contrast to the soft echoes of Chopin flowing from the practice rooms. At 28, her uniform, beige and functional, clung to her with a kind of quiet dignity. The custodial staff's simple clothes, while practical, set her apart from the elegant world around her, the world where talent, wealth, and ambition ruled. She had learned long ago to make herself as invisible as the dust she removed from the ancient picture frames lining the hallways. 3 years of working in this prestigious institution, and the staff and students had become experts at ignoring her presence. No one took the time to look twice. Most days, Emily was as unnoticed as the dust she quietly swept away. She did her job well, quietly, efficiently, and no one bothered her. She had accepted this as her place, a quiet observer in a world of sound and spectacle. It wasn't that Emily didn't appreciate music. She had once dreamed of performing on the grand stages, her fingers dancing across a piano as effortlessly as the notes themselves. But that was before life had intervened, before love, and choices made out of it, had led her down a different path. She had once been a promising young pianist, a child prodigy in her small town, but love had changed her trajectory. She had traded her own dreams for others' expectations, and now, as she moved through the halls of the conservatory, she was nothing more than a silent observer of the art she had once mastered. As she passed through the grand reception area, her eyes caught sight of the gleaming Steinway piano in the corner of the room. It stood there, untouched by her hands, a symbol of everything she had given up. For a moment, she let herself imagine, if only for a second, what it would be like to sit at that piano again, to feel the keys beneath her fingers, to lose herself in the music once more. But she shook the thought away quickly. The past was the past. She had made her peace with it, or so she told herself each day. Her life now was here, in the halls of the conservatory, where her job was to clean, to maintain, to make the place perfect for the students and faculty. She had no illusions of being anything more. "Emily, can you handle the reception area today? The board is coming in," her supervisor, Mr. Collins, called out without even looking up from his clipboard. "Yes, Mr. Collins," she replied, her voice soft, and she moved toward the grand area. The floors were pristine, the glass doors glittering with reflections of the early evening light. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and wax polish. It was a world of elegance, a world that didn't see her, except when they needed something done. As she adjusted a crooked portrait of a composer, a woman entered the room with the distinct click of heels against the marble floor. Victoria Parker, the conservatory's unchallenged ruler. At 53, Victoria carried herself with the kind of authority that commanded respect. Her sharp navy suit, her perfectly styled silver bob, everything about her radiated power and precision. She had been a concert pianist before taking over the conservatory, and her reputation was built on a foundation of relentless drive and excellence. Victoria glanced at Emily as she passed, her expression a perfect mask of professionalism. Cool, detached. "Those chairs need to be exactly 1 inch apart," she said, barely acknowledging Emily's presence. "We can't have the Jefferson Foundation representatives think we're sloppy." "Yes, Mrs. Parker," Emily replied automatically, her hands moving to rearrange the chairs with a practiced efficiency. From across the room, Samantha Reed, the conservatory's star piano instructor, watched the exchange with a barely hidden smirk. Samantha had built a reputation for herself on perfection, always producing competition winners. Her voice rang out just loud enough for Emily to hear, "Victoria, don't forget to remind the staff to use the service corridors when the guests arrive. Last time, I had to watch someone in a janitor's uniform cross the lobby during the Chopin competition." Emily felt her face flush, but she continued to adjust the chairs, her hands steady, betraying none of the discomfort she felt. It was all part of the routine now. The small jabs, the dismissals, the moments that made her feel small. Later, as Emily polished the brass handrail along the grand staircase, the sounds of a piano drifted toward her from the open door of a practice room. A young girl, maybe 12, was struggling with a difficult passage. The frustration was evident on her face as she fumbled through the measures, hitting wrong notes. Without thinking, Emily whispered to herself, "Try releasing your wrist more on the arpeggios." The words had slipped out before she could stop them. The girl turned, startled, and just as quickly Samantha appeared in the doorway. "Did you just try to instruct my student?" Samantha's voice was cold, laced with disdain. Emily felt her stomach drop. "I'm sorry. You just what?" Samantha's voice sharpened. "Thought that your expertise as a janitor gave you the right to comment on piano technique?" She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Stick to what you know, Emily. Cleaning supplies and trash collection." The door slammed shut in Emily's face before she could say anything else. She stood there for a moment, feeling the sting of the words, the weight of the rejection. But she didn't let it show. She resumed polishing the railing, her hands moving with a quiet grace that no one would ever see. What they didn't know was that Emily's fingers, when no one was looking, still moved as if playing the piano. They traced the notes of the piece the student had been playing, correcting the mistakes in her mind, perfecting the music no one else would hear. The night of the annual fundraising gala arrived, and Emily worked in the background, making sure everything was in place. The conservatory gleamed under her meticulous care. The guests, wealthy donors whose contributions funded the conservatory's future, would soon fill the hall. The donations they made would determine the success of the institution for the coming year, and Emily worked hard to ensure everything would be perfect for them. As she worked in the reception area, Samantha burst through the doors, phone pressed to her ear, her face tight with panic. "What do you mean you're in the hospital?" she yelled. "The gala starts in an hour, Olivia. You can't possibly—" She paused, listening. "Food poisoning? Today of all days?" Samantha ended the call with a look of frustration. Victoria rushed toward her, sensing disaster. "What's happened?" she demanded. "Olivia can't perform," Samantha snapped. "She's in the emergency room." Victoria's hand flew to her pearl necklace. "But she's our centerpiece. The Jefferson Foundation specifically requested Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody." "I know that," Samantha cut in. "None of my other students can handle that piece without preparation." Jason Miller, a young teaching assistant who had always been kind to Emily, hesitated before stepping forward. "Mrs. Parker, if I might make a suggestion." His voice was tentative. Victoria turned, looking desperate for a solution. "What is it, Jason?" Jason hesitated, then continued. "I've heard someone else play that piece. Quite brilliantly, actually." "Who?" Victoria asked, confused. "Professor Williams is out of town, unless you're suggesting one of the graduate students?" "No," Jason said, his eyes shifting toward Emily, who was standing nearby, dusting a display case. I'm suggesting Emily. The room fell into stunned silence. Samantha's laugh rang out, sharp and dismissive. The janitor? You can't be serious. Jason remained undeterred. I've heard her play, after hours, when she thought no one was listening. She's remarkable. Victoria and Samantha exchanged a glance of disbelief before turning to look at Emily, who had frozen, duster still in hand. Is this true? Victoria demanded, her voice cold. You play piano? Emily slowly lowered the duster, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of red. Yes, ma'am, she replied, her voice soft but steady. And you think you can play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody? Samantha's tone dripped with disbelief, as though the very idea was a mockery. Emily hesitated, then locked eyes with Samantha, perhaps for the first time in 3 years. Yes, ma'am, I can. Victoria Parker's eyes narrowed, studying Emily with a keen gaze that felt almost like an inspection. For the first time, she truly saw the woman before her. This woman in the simple beige uniform who had been overlooked for so long. You honestly believe you could perform at our fundraising gala? Victoria's voice was skeptical, but tinged with curiosity. Emily stood motionless, trapped in the unexpected spotlight of their attention. Around them, the usual bustle of the staff preparing for the gala continued as if nothing had changed. No one noticed the growing tension that surrounded her. Samantha was the first to break the silence. Let me understand this, she said, her voice heavy with condescension. You believe you can step in for Olivia Sanders, who's been training at the finest institutions since she was 5? Emily's reply was simple and firm. I know the piece. Richard Taylor, the chairman of the board, wandered into their small circle, sensing the unusual tension. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the growing drama. What's going on, Victoria? He asked. Victoria gave a forced laugh, trying to downplay the situation. Apparently, she said, our custodian believes she can save the evening's performance. Richard's gaze swept over Emily, from her practical shoes to the simplicity of her uniform. His eyes lingered for a moment on her hands, the same hands that had been cleaning trash bins and wiping down surfaces just moments before. Well, Richard said slowly, a glint of something darkly entertained in his eyes. This is certainly unexpected. Samantha leaned in closer to Victoria and Richard, lowering her voice, though not enough to conceal it from Emily. It might actually work to our advantage, she whispered. We could present it as a part of our community outreach initiative. If she's terrible, we make a self-deprecating joke about our desperate situation. If she's halfway decent, we look generous for giving the help a chance to shine. Victoria's expression shifted slightly, as though the idea was beginning to take root. The donors might find it charming, a little prelude before we explain Olivia's unfortunate situation. Emily remained silent, her presence shrinking under the weight of their discussion. She had become little more than a prop in their performance, a tool to further their image, nothing more than an object to be manipulated rather than a person with dignity and self-worth. It's settled then, Victoria said, turning back to Emily. You'll play tonight. One piece, the least. Emily's voice, almost lost in the noise, pierced the air. And if I refuse? Victoria's smile was cold, calculated. Then we'll need to reassess whether your position here is still necessary. You understand, don't you? Budget cuts. In that instant, Emily realized that this was no longer just about music. This was about her very identity, about standing up for herself, about holding on to the dignity she had so carefully preserved, even in the shadows. This was the moment to decide: stand tall or shrink away. As the gala drew near, the grand hall filled with the conservatory's most important patrons. Their evening attire sparkled under the chandeliers, their laughter and conversation mingling with the sound of champagne glasses clinking. Backstage, Emily stood alone. She was still in her beige uniform, the name tag Emily J. pinned to her chest like a scarlet letter, marking her as an outsider, as someone who didn't belong. Victoria took the microphone, her practiced smile beaming across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have a slight change to our program this evening." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the words hang in the air. "Our scheduled pianist had an unfortunate emergency." A soft ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. "But in the spirit of our community outreach initiatives," Victoria continued, "we have a special alternative performance tonight." A murmur of curiosity filled the hall as Victoria's voice grew more theatrical. "One of our maintenance staff has graciously volunteered to demonstrate how music touches all lives, regardless of background or training." The words, wrapped in thinly veiled mockery, hung in the air like an insult. Emily stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of the spotlight on her. The audience's laughter, quiet at first, began to float from the back of the room, cruel whispers, already anticipating her failure. Samantha stood near the curtain, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips, as though this was all a game to her. Emily sat at the grand piano, its surface gleaming under the lights. For 15 years, she had only played in empty rooms or on her grandmother's old, worn piano at home. Never like this. Never with judgment hanging over her like a sword ready to fall. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. In the front row, Richard leaned toward his companion, his voice low but audible. This should be entertaining, if nothing else. Emily closed her eyes, shutting out the laughter, the whispers, the judgment. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she found herself back in her grandmother's living room. Her grandmother, once a concert pianist herself, her hands bent by arthritis but still filled with the memory of music. "Music isn't about who you are to the world," her grandmother's voice echoed in Emily's mind. "It's about who you are when the world falls away." With those words, Emily's fingers pressed down on the keys. The first notes of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 rang out. Rich, full, commanding. The hesitant sound they had expected never came. Instead, the music swelled with confidence and mastery. Her hands moved with precision and passion, each note a story, each passage a moment of defiance. The whispers died. The smirks faltered. 200 people fell silent, captivated by the beauty of the music. As the piece surged through its demanding technical passages, Emily's body swayed with the rhythms. Her face, too, transformed, lit by the music that flowed through her, graceful in the playful sections, powerful in the thunderous crescendos. The entire hall seemed to tremble with the energy she unleashed. In the third row, an elderly patron wiped away tears. A renowned music critic, attending the gala by chance, leaned forward, his face a mixture of shock and admiration. Victoria's face had drained of color. Samantha stood rigid, her knuckles tight against the curtain as she watched in stunned disbelief. Jason, the young teaching assistant, stood watching with quiet satisfaction. He had been right. Truth had revealed itself, note by perfect note. When Emily finished with the final, thunderous chord, the hall fell into a profound silence. 3 heartbeats passed before the room erupted. At first, the applause was hesitant, as though the audience couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. Then the clapping grew louder, swelling into a thunderous standing ovation. "Bravo!" echoed throughout the hall, filling the space with genuine admiration. People who had expected an awkward display, prepared to endure a janitor's half-hearted attempt, were now on their feet, their faces shining with genuine emotion. Emily sat motionless for a moment, overwhelmed by the outpouring of applause. When she finally rose, offering a small, humble bow, the applause intensified, proof that she had not only met their expectations but exceeded them. David Thompson, a highly respected conductor and special guest for the evening, made his way to the stage just as Emily tried to slip backstage, hoping to avoid any further attention. "Wait!" His authoritative voice cut through the applause, halting Emily mid-step. "Young lady, where did you study?" Emily turned back, her face flushed under the harsh spotlight, still in her simple uniform. "I didn't, sir. Not formally." The murmurs rippled through the crowd as David drew closer, his disbelief evident. "That's impossible. Your technique, your interpretation." He seemed almost stunned by the idea. Emily's voice, quiet yet unwavering, carried clearly to every corner of the now silent hall. "My grandmother taught me." David's expression changed as recognition slowly crossed his features. "Margaret Johnson?" he asked. "The Margaret Johnson who played with the National Symphony in the 70s? Emily nodded, a quiet affirmation. "She raised me after my parents died. We couldn't afford conservatory tuition, but she taught me everything she knew." Victoria, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward with a practiced smile, already repositioning the situation in her mind. How fascinating. What a wonderful human interest story. Emily's response was soft but firm, carrying a weight of defiance. "It's not a story. It's my life." The dignity in her voice left Victoria speechless for a moment, silencing her more effectively than any sharp retort could have. Emily continued, her gaze now fixed directly on Samantha. "I was accepted to Juilliard 15 years ago," she said, the words heavy with emotion. "But my grandmother had a stroke that same week. I stayed to care for her. By the time she passed, there were medical bills, and the opportunity was gone." David nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "So you took a job here to stay close to music?" Emily simply nodded. "Yes." Her answer was simple, yet it spoke volumes about sacrifice, about dreams deferred but not abandoned. It spoke of a woman who had found a way to stay connected to what she loved, even when the world had tried to shut that door. In that moment, standing in her uniform under the unforgiving spotlight, Emily Johnson was no longer just the woman who cleaned their halls. She was someone undeniably, irrevocably human in their eyes. The reception hall buzzed with excitement as patrons who had never before given Emily a second glance now looked at her with eager curiosity and newfound respect. Her name was now on their lips, but it wasn't the name of a janitor. It was the name of someone who had transcended the roles they had confined her to. "Your interpretation of the middle section was extraordinary," remarked a silver-haired woman, one of the major donors, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "So much emotional depth." Emily accepted the praise with quiet grace, neither shrinking from it nor letting it inflate her ego. Across the room, Victoria Parker moved through the crowd with mechanical precision, her smile strained as she fielded questions about the surprising discovery. Of course, we recognized her potential, she told a major donor. Our community outreach programs are designed to nurture hidden talents like hers. Nearby, Samantha stood by the refreshment table, her usual circle of admirers conspicuously absent. She watched as her top students gathered around Emily, their admiration genuine and untainted by the kind of credentials that once had defined success. Jason approached Emily, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. "I told you they'd be amazed," he said quietly, offering her one. Emily accepted it with a grateful smile. "Thank you for speaking up," she said softly. Not many people would have. Before Jason could respond, David Thompson reappeared, this time accompanied by Elizabeth Chen, the head of the Jefferson Foundation. "Miss Johnson," Elizabeth said warmly, yet with clear purpose in her tone, "our foundation believes that talent should never be limited by circumstance. We've been looking for someone to lead a new initiative for underprivileged youth, someone who understands both the pursuit of musical excellence and the barriers that many face." Emily's eyes widened slightly as she realized the significance of the offer. "The position would include teaching and performing," David added. "Your story and your extraordinary talent could inspire countless young people who believe certain doors are forever closed to them." As they spoke, Emily noticed Richard Taylor standing at a distance, watching the scene unfold with a guarded expression. The power dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably, like tectonic plates shifting after an earthquake. Now everyone was forced to navigate the unfamiliar terrain that had been created. 3 months later, Emily walked through the same hallways she had once cleaned, now carrying sheet music instead of cleaning supplies. The transformation had not been dramatic or instantaneous. There was no fairy tale ending where the janitor became a princess overnight. No, reality was more nuanced, more meaningful. She still wore simple clothes, though no longer a uniform. Her new role with the Jefferson Foundation's Music Within Reach program gave her the chance to work with students from backgrounds like her own, talented kids who hadn't been afforded the same opportunities that more privileged students had. As she passed the reception area, she nodded to Victoria, who returned the gesture with a tight, professional smile. Their relationship had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, not warmth, but an understanding of the other's place. Some lessons, it seemed, took time to learn. In the EO practice room, 8 teenagers waited for her, their faces a mix of hope and caution. They came from neighborhoods where music programs had been slashed, where pianos were luxuries beyond their means. Emily smiled gently at them, her heart swelling with empathy. "My grandmother used to say that music isn't about who you are to the world," she began, sitting at the piano. "It's about who you are when the world falls away." Then, with that same quiet confidence, she began to play, just as she had at the gala. Not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but because music was her truth. As her students listened, their eyes widened with wonder at the possibilities before them. They could see what was possible, what could be achieved, even if they had never before been shown a path. And in that moment, Emily understood something deeply important. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't conquering some grand obstacle. It's simply being who you are without apology in a world that tries to make you invisible.